So let's talk a little bit about one of the more interesting areas for me as an international relations scholar related to the effects of a changing climate on the likelihood of conflict and cooperation across boundaries and across the major powers. This is a picture of what the Arctic Circle and what we consider the Arctic region to look like, as well as the countries that border it. You see the more extensive borders being that of Russia and Canada, but other countries like Iceland, Norway, Finland, Denmark, through Greenland, the United States, with Alaska, also have areas of territory that are in or touching the Arctic Ocean. And this is one area that's probably not gotten that much attention here in Australia, given the fact that it's on the other side of the world, but that there has been substantial variation within a particular year, as well as across the last couple decades. There's been a dramatic decrease in the amount of sea ice in the Arctic. This is a time-lapse satellite photo, just kind of looking at the ebb and flow of the sea ice over time in the area. And there's been a lot of discussion, you'll see this in the documentary that I'm going to put in a second, that there's been dramatic decreases in the extent and the thickness of Arctic sea ice, which is allowing for the first time in human history, at least, commercial vessels to make an ice-free trip from the Atlantic to the Pacific without needing icebreakers, because icebreakers are large and expensive ships. Not all countries have them, and it can make this transit quite risky in normal circumstances. But over the next couple decades, it already has been increasingly easy for boats to be able to make it to this region, and it's just estimated to increase over time. So there is a lot of natural resources underneath the ice, huge untapped petroleum reserves, which we're going to talk about later, as well as the transit opportunities in this area that's led to a lot of jockeying for power and position by the U.S., by Canada, by Russia, and other states that are affected by the Arctic. And I think one of the more recent examples of this was in 2007, I believe. Russia took one of their submarines and placed a Russian flag on the geographic North Pole to kind of establish their right to have an influence and a say about what happens at the North Pole. I think this is probably put better by this Al Jazeera documentary that I'm going to insert here. It's a little bit less than a half an hour, but it shows the effects of climate change and environmental factors on indigenous populations, on militaries and search and rescue support, on military security and economic opportunities that I would encourage you to take a look at. It's really interesting, and it's a visceral take on how climate change is really having a dramatic effect in an area in which you have both Russia, the US, as well as other powers having a substantial interest in trying to take advantage of it for their own interests as well as for their own peoples.